'Cause you're inside, outside, under my skin. Can't get you out of my mind, feel you within.
They called her the Australian Marilyn Monroe. But what if behind the blonde curls and sultry smile was a woman screaming for help, and no one listened? Sophie Monk was once the country's pop sweetheart, the perfect blend of innocence and allure. She had the voice, the face, the fantasy. But what began as a dazzling career soon turned into a public spectacle, where every relationship, every heartbreak, and every inch of her body became fodder for tabloids. At the height of her fame, she wasn't just performing on stage, she was performing her life, under a spotlight that never turned off. Years later, in a rare interview stripped of filters and PR gloss, Sophie admitted something haunting. She no longer recognized the person the world kept showing her. "They created someone I wasn't," she said, her voice cracking. "And I played the part because it was easier than saying no." That single confession revealed the cost of a career built not just on talent, but on relentless media projection and personal sacrifice. In this episode, we trace the rise and unraveling of Sophie Monk, not just as a pop star, but as a cultural mirror reflecting our obsession with fame, sex appeal, and control. Beneath the red carpets and reality shows lies a story of exploitation, loneliness, and a desperate search for self-worth in an industry that traded her soul for ratings. This is not just about a celebrity. It's about what happens when your name becomes a brand, and the brand becomes a prison. At the turn of the new millennium, Australia was swept up in a pop culture revolution. Reality TV was exploding, and a fresh wave of homegrown stars was being minted on screen. Among them, one name glittered brighter than most: Sophie Monk. Born in Queensland and raised on classical music and dreams of stardom, she first captured national attention as a contestant on Popstars Australia in 1999. With her striking looks and breathy vocals, she was chosen to join the newly formed girl group Bardot. Overnight, Sophie became a household name. Bardot's debut single, Poison, soared to #1, and their self-titled album broke sales records. Young girls wanted to be her. Boys plastered her posters on their bedroom walls. But from the beginning, Sophie stood apart, not just the blonde among brunettes, but the one groomed for solo stardom. The media latched onto her like a moth to flame, branding her as the blonde bombshell and focusing more on her body than her music. While the group dissolved after just 2 albums, Sophie's individual allure only intensified. She transitioned into acting, landing roles in Hollywood comedies like Date Movie and Click. Her Australian charm and pin-up looks made her a novelty in the US, often cast as the seductive sidekick or ditzy girlfriend. Yet, despite her efforts to break into serious roles, the industry and the public seemed uninterested in anything beyond her image. Back home, the press treated her less like a person and more like a product. Every relationship was a headline, from Benji Madden to her high-profile engagement and eventual heartbreak. Every dress she wore became a talking point. Even her tone of voice, her laugh, her way of walking were dissected on morning talk shows and celebrity blogs. By the late 2000s, Sophie had become a permanent fixture of Australian media, not just as a performer, but as content. She appeared on The Bachelorette, hosted Love Island Australia, and joined panels on gossip programs. But with each appearance, a piece of her seemed to fade. What was once a pop star chasing her dream had become a media puppet, performing versions of herself that others had written. In subtle ways, Sophie began to push back. She gave interviews laced with dark humor and biting honesty. She hinted at depression, burnout, and being over it all. But the machine kept spinning, and so did she. Fame, it seemed, was a carousel she could not step off from. What makes Sophie Monk's story more than just a celebrity arc is how eerily it reflects the changing face of fame itself. She wasn't just a victim of the spotlight. She was emblematic of an era where personalities were packaged, marketed, and consumed. Where being famous meant being available, always. And where any attempt to reclaim your image was seen as rebellion. As we peel back the layers of her public life, one question lingers. Did Sophie choose this path, or was she chosen for it? Sophie Monk's rise to fame began like a fairy tale scripted for prime time. As a young woman growing up in the suburbs of Gold Coast, she trained in opera and dreamed of the stage. Her breakout came not through auditions in smoky clubs, but in front of a national audience on Popstars Australia, one of the first reality talent shows of its kind. She was the ideal candidate, telegenic, charismatic, and possessing a unique blend of innocence and sensuality that instantly set her apart. When she was selected for Bardot, the producers knew they had found their golden girl. With Bardot, Sophie experienced instant success. Their first single, Poison, debuted at #1. They were swarmed by fans, followed by paparazzi, and treated like royalty in the pop scene. But behind the glamour, cracks were forming. The group, hastily assembled and under intense scrutiny, battled internal frictions. Sophie, often spotlighted by media and fans alike, became a source of tension. Some whispered that she was being positioned for a solo career from the very start. By 2002, Bardot disbanded. While the other members faded into relative obscurity, Sophie was just beginning her next act. She moved to Los Angeles, a bold leap few Australian pop stars had made. Hollywood welcomed her with cautious curiosity. She landed roles in comedies like Date Movie and Click, appearing alongside industry giants like Adam Sandler. Her roles were often satirical, poking fun at the very image she was trying to escape. The ditzy blonde, the oversexed bimbo, the joke. In public, Sophie laughed along. But behind the scenes, the Hollywood system was chewing her up. She was typecast repeatedly, and serious roles never came. She once auditioned for a dramatic film and was told flatly, "We're not looking for someone like you." Even when she delivered strong readings, producers seemed unable or unwilling to see past her looks. As her American dream stalled, Sophie returned to Australia, only to find the media there more voracious than ever. In the absence of blockbuster films or chart-topping singles, she became famous for being famous. Every boyfriend was tabloid bait. When she got engaged to Benji Madden of Good Charlotte, paparazzi camped outside her home. When they broke up, headlines screamed betrayal and humiliation. Sophie had become the main course for Australia's insatiable celebrity press. The escalation came in the form of reality television. Sophie appeared in The Bachelorette Australia, a calculated move that blurred the lines between reality and performance. Viewers weren't watching her fall in love. They were watching to see if she could redeem her image. But every laugh, every tear, every hesitation was dissected online. Social media users accused her of faking sincerity. Others mocked her for being too old, too plastic, or too desperate. No matter what she did, she was either not enough or too much. By the time she began hosting Love Island Australia, Sophie had perfected the mask. She delivered lines with a mix of irony and detachment, fully aware of the absurdity surrounding her. But this cynicism wasn't just performance, it was survival. The young woman who once dreamt of being an artist had become an avatar, a media personality whose real life was just a subplot. Then came the unexpected consequences. Sophie began speaking out, not loudly, but noticeably. She told interviewers she was tired, that the industry had drained her, that people didn't want the real her, only the version they'd invented. She hinted at mental health struggles, about the weight of carrying a persona for so long it started to feel like a stranger. And yet she continued, because stepping away from the limelight meant disappearing. And disappearing, in a world addicted to presence, felt like death. The consequences were subtle but sharp. Opportunities dried up. Serious roles never came. Even brand endorsements began to fade as newer, younger faces emerged. Sophie was no longer the blonde bombshell of the early 2000s. She was a woman navigating the wreckage of a career built on expectations she never got to write. And so the narrative shifted. Sophie Monk was no longer just a star. She had become a symbol, a cautionary tale, an echo of what fame can do when it is no longer earned, but extracted. There's a moment, buried deep in a 2018 interview, when Sophie Monk pauses mid-sentence. She's laughing, recounting a story from her time filming Love Island Australia, but the laughter quickly fades. "People think I'm this confident, funny blonde chick," she says, "but I go home and cry more nights than I don't." The camera lingers on her just long enough to capture a truth she rarely lets slip. Sophie Monk, the national sweetheart, was crumbling under the weight of being everyone's fantasy. The truth, as it turns out, wasn't just painful, it was systemic. For over a decade, Sophie had been commodified. Her beauty was her currency, her public image a brand built by producers, tabloid editors, and PR teams. Every smile, every cleavage-bearing red carpet dress, every romantic failure was curated, circulated, and sold. The Sophie Monk the public adored was never quite real, and the more famous she became, the more invisible the real woman felt. There are stories whispered in media circles. Producers who pressured her to play dumb. Executives who refused to cast her unless she agreed to sexualize herself. Reality show contracts that gave networks control over her narrative. Sophie once joked on air that she had signed so many NDAs, she couldn't even remember what parts of her life belonged to her. The joke landed, but behind it was something darker. Her life had become a script, and she no longer had final edit. Her dating life was weaponized. When her engagement to Benji Madden ended, she was portrayed as the broken-hearted blonde. When she appeared on The Bachelorette, skeptics called it a career move. No one asked how it felt to turn genuine intimacy into primetime spectacle. When Sophie revealed that she had suffered from endometriosis and undergone surgery in silence, the media barely paused before spinning it into headlines about her fertility and relationship prospects. Her pain was always public property. The dark truth is that Sophie's downfall wasn't caused by one scandal or one mistake. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Years of being judged not for talent, but for waistlines. Years of being told to smile wider, wear less, speak softer. She once confessed in an interview, "I started playing into what they wanted, just to survive. But then, I didn't know who I was anymore." It's a line that rarely makes headlines, but it says everything. Perhaps most chilling is the media's complicity in her unraveling. Shows invited her to laugh at herself, only to mock her when she did. Articles praised her honesty, only to dissect her vulnerabilities. Sophie became the perfect entertainment loop, too broken to be threatening, too familiar to be forgotten. And yet, through all this, the public never quite let go. There was always something endearing about her, a glimmer of sincerity beneath the layers of gloss. But even that sincerity was commodified. She was applauded for being real while still being edited. Her trauma became a genre. What's more, Sophie knew it. In one interview, she sighed and said, "I don't even know if people like me or just the idea of me." It wasn't self-pity. It was clarity. The industry had chewed her up and handed her back to the audience as a product they could laugh with, cry with, and eventually forget. Behind the scenes, former colleagues spoke of her kindness, her relentless professionalism, and her quiet intelligence, traits rarely covered in the tabloids. A producer on Love Island once said, "Sophie was always the smartest person in the room, but we never gave her credit for that." In the end, perhaps the most tragic truth is this: Sophie Monk was never allowed to just be. Not an artist, not a woman, not even a person. She was a role she played so convincingly we forgot it was an act. Sophie Monk's story is not just a cautionary tale, it's a cultural indictment. At Aussie Uncovered, we don't believe Sophie failed the system. We believe the system failed her. She entered the spotlight young, eager, and talented. She could sing, she had timing, she had presence. But from the very beginning, it was never her talent that the public or the press were interested in. It was her image, her body, her smile, her relationships. The machinery of fame took everything she was and simplified it into a marketable idea: the hot blonde with a cheeky laugh. And when she tried to step outside that mold, when she reached for serious roles, or wanted privacy, or demanded to be taken seriously, the industry simply shrugged and turned her into a caricature. In many ways, Sophie became a mirror for Australia's own obsession with celebrity. We made her into something beautiful, then punished her when she didn't remain perfect. We praised her candor, only to mock her pain. We cheered her comebacks, but we were always waiting for the next fall. Sophie was never allowed to be complex. She was a fantasy, and fantasies aren't supposed to have real feelings. What makes Sophie's case more disturbing is how normalized her treatment became. The media dissected her dating life as if it were public property. Her body was discussed on breakfast radio. Her career choices were sneered at as attention-seeking, even when they were desperate acts of survival. And all the while, Sophie played along, because that's what was expected. Because saying no meant vanishing. But through the haze of tabloid drama and reality TV edits, something else emerged. Something more human. A woman who was smarter than anyone gave her credit for. A survivor who kept showing up even when she was exhausted. a performer who knew the game, but still tried to find moments of honesty inside it. We see Sophie Monk not as a cautionary tale of a fame-hungry celebrity, but as a symbol of what happens when someone is too famous to quit and too human to fake it forever. Her story isn't about mistakes, it's about exhaustion, about being devoured by the very spotlight that once promised warmth. At Aussie Uncovered, we ask, what do we really want from the stars we create? Do we want their truth or just their performance? Because if Sophie Monk had been given space to evolve, to be taken seriously, to stumble and get back up without cameras rolling, maybe her story would be different. Maybe she'd be celebrated not for how she looked, but for what she endured, for how she endured it. So we leave it with you. When you think of Sophie Monk, what do you see? A joke? A bombshell? Or a woman who gave everything, only to be remembered for all the wrong reasons? Was she ever truly seen, or just watched? And more importantly, are we still doing this to someone else right now? There was a time when Sophie Monk stood on stage beneath shimmering lights, singing pop anthems to screaming fans who saw her as invincible. A time when her name lit up headlines and her face sold magazines. But time has a cruel way of blurring the line between icon and artifact. And now, looking back, it's hard to tell where the girl ended and the symbol began. What remains is the echo of a voice that tried to be heard through the noise. A laugh that became a defense mechanism, a beauty that became a burden. Sophie was never just a pop star or a reality TV queen. She was a reflection of what the media wanted and what the public devoured. She wore that mask so long, we forgot there was someone behind it. And yet, through the mockery, the exploitation, the heartbreaks played out for ratings, she stayed, she showed up, she smiled when she had to, she cracked jokes when it hurt. And in the quiet moments, she revealed glimpses of someone far more complex than the tabloids ever allowed us to see. Sophie Monk may never get the career she once dreamed of. She may never be fully recognized for her resilience, her wit, her fight to reclaim her name. But somewhere in all the chaos, she left a mark. A cautionary flicker of humanity in a world built on illusion. Some stories are never told, but now you know. She wasn't just a blonde bombshell. She wasn't just a headline. She was a woman, carved up by the culture, still standing in the ruins, still smiling, because that's what she was taught to do. And maybe, just maybe, that smile meant something more than we ever realized.